Yeah.
What you think about that?
He didn't do it.
Just like that, Charleston White boldly proclaimed David's innocence, and he backed it with evidence no one saw coming. What he revealed shocked everyone, flipping the case on its head and making the world question everything they believed was true. Charleston White didn't hesitate. He declared David innocent. When word first spread that a dismembered body was found inside a Tesla registered to rising music star David, the internet exploded with accusations, theories, and outrage. Headlines condemned him before a single charge was filed. Fans dissected his lyrics like confessions, and brands cut ties instantly to save face. But in the chaos, one voice rose above the noise, a man unafraid to speak what no one else dared. Charleston White, blunt, controversial, and unapologetically raw, stunned the public when he claimed the 20-year-old artist wasn't guilty at all. In fact, he argued that the very absence of an arrest proved David's innocence.
Yeah.
What you think about that?
He didn't do it.
Fuck out of here. All the evidence that's out there.
It wasn't an offhand remark. Charleston doubled down with reasoning he called undeniable. He pointed out that in America, especially for young black men, arrests happen with far less evidence every single day. If authorities truly had something concrete on David, Charleston said, he'd already be locked up. They arrest with way less proof, he emphasized. They'll throw you in jail just to hold you. To him, the lack of charges didn't mean police were quietly building a bigger case. It meant they didn't have one at all. He broke it down with one of his signature analogies: raw, unfiltered, and crafted to make his audience squirm just enough to think deeper.
Listen, hold on. If they find a dead body in me and your car, and this is our car, do you think they'll let me and you stay out like long they got out? So think about this.
That harsh comparison cut straight to Charleston's point. He argued that an ordinary person would already be behind bars if a body were tied to their name. The fact that David was still free, still performing, still walking publicly without being detained, that, Charleston said, spoke louder than any rumor. But he didn't stop there. He went on to dismantle the allegations that David had been romantically involved with an underage girl and somehow connected to her brutal death. Online, speculation ran wild. Matching tattoos, leaked pictures, and lyrics fans insisted were self-incriminating. Yet Charleston dismissed it all, calling the story too neat, too convenient, the kind of setup built to destroy someone's life.
So think about this. If they got all this information on him dating a minor, an underage kid, and she looked like a white girl, mixed girl, what they let just stay free like this?
In Charleston's view, the story simply didn't add up. A black artist allegedly tied to a missing 15-year-old, supposedly linked to her death with physical evidence. Yet no detention, no charges, no attempt to even hold him? To Charleston, that silence wasn't negligence. It was confirmation that David might not be the monster people thought he was. True to form, Charleston didn't hold back. He urged his audience to think about how the body was found, dismembered, hidden, a crime showing cold precision and cruelty that didn't match David's nature. He pushed the crowd to consider whether this entire tragedy was a setup, whether someone else entirely could be responsible. They got all this so-called evidence saying he did it, he said, but none of it adds up. He'd gone as far as slicing up the body, the remains butchered, and still, no arrest. As those words ricocheted across X, YouTube, and Instagram, Charleston's take split the internet in two. To some, he was defending the indefensible, trying to clear a man whose own car held a teenager's remains. But to others, Charleston was one of the few willing to voice what they'd been too afraid to say. Maybe this story wasn't so simple. Charleston White didn't just drop a hot take and walk away. He stayed on it, drilling his point again and again. To him, David's continued freedom wasn't just strange. It was impossible to reconcile with the story being told. He reminded his followers of one of the most infamous trials in history, the O.J. Simpson case.
So you mean to tell me O.J. was found with a bloody glove, he was arrested immediately? Immediately, with all the circumstantial evidence they found on O.J., they placed it. So you mean to tell me they got all of this on this and he still get to move freely amongst America?
By invoking O.J., Charleston wasn't merely drawing a parallel, he was exposing what he saw as hypocrisy in how justice works. If police can cage a man off the thinnest circumstantial clues, then why hadn't they done the same to David, who supposedly had far more damning evidence stacked against him? Charleston pushed his argument into darker territory, spinning theories that hinted at someone else's involvement. Possibilities uncomfortable to hear, but revealing of just how little faith he had in the official story.
So I'm saying, let me think outside the box. Maybe his mama done it. Maybe her mama done it and set him up. Maybe one of them racist uncles or cousins don't like her. Maybe the other boyfriend done it. Maybe the pimp who was sex trafficking her for the last year when she ran away done it.
These weren't polished courtroom defenses. They were raw, unfiltered ideas hurled into the public square like grenades. But that's exactly what made Charleston's voice echo. He wasn't bound by legal protocol or evidence standards. He spoke with emotion, blunt and chaotic, yet magnetic. In doing so, he painted a portrait of a case that, to him, simply didn't add up. He even mocked the claim that David's link to the victim was proven, tearing apart the viral narrative about their matching tattoos. Online detectives had clung to the image, both David and the 15-year-old sharing an identical shirt tattoo on their index fingers, as proof of intimacy. But Charleston wasn't convinced. To him, the tattoo wasn't evidence of romance. It was proof of how easily weak details could become headlines. Then came the moment that set the internet on fire. Charleston's most controversial statement yet. He turned his criticism toward the girl herself, using words that many found offensive, but that revealed his belief David was being framed as a scapegoat.
And I know they said, man, he wrong for calling her a little hoe, but she was. Little girl don't run away from home, little hoes and little bitches.
That line wasn't just harsh, it was explosive. Critics accused him of victim blaming, of defending David by tearing down a child who couldn't defend herself. Yet Charleston supporters argued he wasn't excusing anything, he was challenging the narrative, forcing people to ask if the story around David had been too one-sided from the start. In Charleston's world, uncomfortable questions were better than silent conformity. He circled back to his core argument, race, making it the backbone of his entire defense. They don't let black men get away with these kinds of crimes. Not in America. That sentence echoed through every corner of social media. For Charleston, it was his ultimate proof. If a young black man had truly done something this horrific, he'd already be locked away. The fact that David was still free, still uncharged, meant something deeper was happening, and that's what made Charleston White stand apart. While others obsessed over tattoos and lyrics, Charleston zeroed in on the bigger picture, race, and how the system behaves when the spotlight is on. By now, he wasn't just questioning the case, he was dismantling it piece by piece, daring anyone to challenge him. His words carried the weight of someone who had studied injustice his entire life. To Charleston, this wasn't only about one rapper, it was about a system that had never shown fairness to black men suddenly appearing too fair in a case built for an instant conviction. His logic was almost paradoxical. The body in a Tesla registered to David, the rumored relationship with a minor, the chilling lyrics, most saw guilt. But Charleston saw something else, innocence. Because if David were truly guilty, he argued, the system wouldn't be hesitating. Charleston wasn't denying that evidence existed. He was saying there was too much of it. So much that its very abundance made the lack of an arrest suspicious. To him, that contradiction screamed for answers. He went even further, spinning theories few others dared to speak aloud. What if, he asked, this wasn't David's crime at all? What if it was a setup? One that looked airtight on the surface but was actually riddled with cracks? Those what ifs turned Charleston's commentary into a viral storm. Some dismissed him as reckless, even dangerous. Others, though, found themselves hesitating, because in the world of fame, setups and cover-ups weren't unheard of. And Charleston knew exactly how to keep that uncertainty alive. Again and again, he circled back to one undeniable fact: David was still free. The death was real. Yes. The relationship rumors existed. Yes. But no arrest. And for millions watching online, it was the kind of declaration that made them stop, rewind, and wonder, maybe, just maybe, he had a point. Charleston White's defense of David didn't appear out of thin air. To understand why his words went viral, why his opinions could ignite millions of comments, and why people even entertained his boldest claims, you have to understand the man himself. Because Charleston White isn't just another voice with a microphone. He's a product of contradiction, a man shaped by crime, redemption, and controversy all tangled together. Charleston's story begins long before this case. Born in 1977 in Texas, his life took a violent, irreversible turn by the time he was just 14 years old. He was involved in a deadly altercation outside a Foot Locker store, an incident that left a man dead. Still just a teenager, Charleston was tried as an adult, convicted of murder, and imprisoned until he was 21. That moment didn't just give him a criminal record, it branded him with a lifelong stigma. To his critics, it proved he had no moral high ground. But to Charleston, it became the cornerstone of his identity, a past mistake that fuels his mission today. After his release, he tried to rebuild himself. He stepped into activism, founding the Hypocrisy Over Politics organization, aimed at steering young people away from gangs and violence. For a time, it looked like he might actually be the story of redemption, a man turning his pain into purpose. But Charleston was never built for quiet reform. His personality, his energy, his need to provoke, all of it pulled him back into the spotlight. Not as a saint, but as a firebrand. By the 2020s, Charleston had become infamous for his brutal honesty and his willingness to call out anyone. Rappers, politicians, even whole communities. T.I., Boosie Badazz, and countless others became targets as he used their names to fuel his brand of online commentary. He didn't just critique them, he went after their families, their parenting, their reputations. Every insult went viral. Every feud drew more attention. And every time, people asked the same question: Was Charleston White a truth teller or just a clout chaser who'd say anything for attention? Take his feud with streamer Aiden Ross, for example. During a 2023 livestream, Charleston pepper-sprayed Ross's associate on camera, sparking chaos and legal threats. That single moment captured Charleston perfectly. Volatile, unpredictable, impossible to ignore. In another viral moment, he waved stacks of cash at hecklers during a comedy show, taunting them instead of calming the crowd. To some, it was entertainment. To others, proof he wasn't a reformed activist at all, just a showman addicted to outrage. And that's exactly why people watch him. Because Charleston doesn't just talk contradiction, he is contradiction. One moment he's condemning gang violence and preaching responsibility. The next, he's mocking victims, laughing at tragedy, and stirring outrage. In September 2025, he even cursed out the family of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk after his death, dismissing it as white-on-white crime and laughing it off. That moment alone revealed Charleston's duality. Part social critic, part troll, all chaos. So when Charleston White speaks, people listen for one of two reasons. They either believe he's exposing hard truths, or they're waiting to catch him contradicting himself. Either way, his words travel fast. And that's why, when he turned his spotlight onto David's case, it mattered. Charleston's voice doesn't exist in silence. It exists at the center of controversy. And this time, his target wasn't a rapper he was feuding with or a politician he despised. It was the system itself, and the claim that David was innocent. By the time Charleston White stood behind David, his reputation was already a collage of scandals, hot takes, and viral explosions. He wasn't an outsider stepping into the storm. He was the storm. And his entry into this case added thunder to an already chaotic debate. In early 2024, Charleston made headlines again after mocking the tragic deaths of Chicago rapper King Von and Houston's Takeoff. He didn't just mention their names. He weaponized them. He laughed. He mocked their legacies. To him, it was a natural end for street life, and clips of his commentary spread like wildfire, solidifying his image as a man who didn't respect sacred ground. For many, that was the moment Charleston stopped being a reformed activist and became a full-blown professional antagonist. Then came the feud with D4vd's. Charleston accused Boosie of being a terrible father, claiming his choices were steering his kids down the same violent path Charleston once walked himself. It wasn't just an insult, it was a public strike at Boosie's family. And when Boosie fired back, Charleston escalated, throwing out threats that blurred the line between comedy and real menace. To Charleston, it was keeping it real. To critics, it was harassment. Even law enforcement wasn't safe. He called out police chiefs, mocked entire departments, and once bragged that he'd shoot any cop who tried him. The contradictions were stacking higher than ever. Here was a man who preached against gang violence, yet glorified confrontation and defiance at every turn. And still, Charleston thrived in the chaos. Every insult, every feud, every outrageous statement only made him bigger. By 2025, he wasn't just an activist, he was a one-man media storm. Whether flashing guns on Instagram Live or roasting rappers in interviews, Charleston had mastered the art of Monetized controversy. So when he spoke up about David, critics rolled their eyes. To them, Charleston wasn't defending truth, he was chasing clout. After all, what better headline could a provocateur sink his teeth into than a teenage pop star accused of murder? But here's the irony. The louder people accused him of clout chasing, the more attention his words attracted. His defense of David wasn't whispered behind closed doors. It was broadcast across YouTube, TikTok, and X, where millions debated, dissected, and repeated every line.
There's nothing else put him in jail just to put a hole on him.
A dead body found in your
If
car?
nothing, listen, hold on. If they find a dead body in me and your car, and this is our car, do you think they'll let me and you stay out like long?
That one clip, stripped of context, racked up millions of views. Some mocked him, others stitched the video in agreement, and countless more commented, "I don't like Charleston, but he's not lying." That was the twisted power of Charleston White. His credibility was constantly under fire, yet his influence only grew. Even those who despised him couldn't look away. And that's why, when he positioned himself as David's unexpected defender, the world listened. When Charleston White spoke out for David, he wasn't just reacting to a headline, he was reliving his own story. To him, David wasn't just another artist in trouble. He was a mirror, a reflection of Charleston's own past, and maybe even a chance to rewrite his history through someone else's struggle. Charleston had spent decades shouting the same message. America is quick to cage young black men without real evidence. He knew that truth intimately. At just 14, his own life had been sealed by a prison sentence. That teenage mistake became a lifelong scar, shaping how he viewed every arrest, every accusation, every name splashed across the news. In David's case, he saw the same trap, only this time, the system hadn't sprung it yet. They don't let black men get away with these kinds of crimes. Not in America. Those weren't just hot words. They were confessions. Charleston believed that if the justice system could lock him away as a child, it would have done the same to David if the case were truly solid. To him, David's freedom wasn't luck, it was proof of innocence. But beneath the theatrics and firebrand persona, something deeper was at play. David, like Charleston in his youth, was a young black man caught in the crosshairs of a story he couldn't control. Guilty or not, the court of public opinion had already passed its sentence. And Charleston knew that pain all too well. In David, he saw a reflection of himself. That was the irony. The same man who mocked dead rappers, insulted victims, and thrived on chaos was now casting himself as a guardian of justice for a young star the world was ready to crucify. Whether you believed him or not, it made the story impossible to ignore. Because in the end, Charleston White wasn't just defending David, he was defending his own past, his own survival, and his unshakable belief that the system never plays fair. But while Charleston's fiery defense spread like wildfire online, the actual case kept evolving. New leaks, fresh speculation, and official updates only deepened the mystery. Now, let's break down the latest twist in the D4vd's case, and what it really means. Authorities confirmed that the body found in the Tesla did, in fact, belong to the missing 15-year-old whose disappearance had shaken the community. The details were grim. Her remains were dismembered, hidden in the trunk, showing clear signs of deliberate concealment. To the public, it looked like an open and shut case. But law enforcement stayed silent. Press conferences repeated the same carefully rehearsed line, "No arrests have been made at this time." That phrase became a drumbeat echoed across headlines and social feeds. Meanwhile, the internet did what it always does. It turned tragedy into content. TikTok detectives combed through David's lyrics, interpreting songs like Romantic Homicide as real-life confessions. Fans analyzed his music videos frame by frame, claiming hidden clues. Others built timelines, comparing David's tours with the girl's disappearance, searching for overlaps. Yet despite the noise, no hard evidence was ever made public. No DNA matches. No eyewitnesses. No confirmed digital trail tying David to the murder. Just speculation, and an avalanche of circumstantial theories. But behind the curtain, the case wasn't stagnant. Detectives were still digging, analyzing cell records, GPS data, and interstate communication logs, since the Tesla and body had allegedly crossed state lines before discovery. Every leak hinted that something larger was unfolding beneath the surface. And this was where Charleston's words became dangerous. By declaring David innocent, he wasn't just offering commentary, he was rewriting the story. Millions of viewers, many of them David's fans, began echoing his claim. On X, hashtags like #FreeDavid and #CharlestonSaidIt started trending. That's the strange power of viral influence. It doesn't just respond to news, it reshapes it. And in David's case, Charleston White had made himself the loudest pen on the page. His defense of David spread beyond his own channels, forcing mainstream outlets to take notice. Journalists who had been covering the case from a purely factual standpoint suddenly found themselves writing about Charleston White, a man with no legal credentials, no official role, but a megaphone too loud to ignore. Opinion pieces exploded overnight. Some called him reckless, accusing him of interfering with an active investigation by declaring innocence without proof. Others admitted, reluctantly, that his point about the lack of an arrest wasn't entirely wrong. Love him or hate him, one truth became undeniable. Charleston White had dragged the case into a brighter and messier spotlight. Meanwhile, fans were splitting into warring camps. On one side were David's defenders, many of them young and fiercely loyal, clinging to Charleston's words like gospel. They quoted his analogies, stitched his clips, and repeated his mantra, he'd be locked up already. On the other side were those who saw Charleston's defense as a slap in the face to the victim and her grieving family. The internet turned vicious. Comment sections became war zones. Users doxed each other, hunted for private info, and traded threats over opinions. What should have been a solemn investigation had turned into the internet's latest battlefield. Even brands were dragged into the crossfire. Companies that had quietly distanced themselves from David in the wake of the scandal suddenly found themselves cornered, cut ties completely and risk alienating his millions of fans, or wait it out and risk being accused of insensitivity. The uncertainty froze endorsement deals in place. David's public image hung in limbo, not destroyed, but far from repaired. Law enforcement, though, wasn't moved by hashtags or headlines. They rarely mentioned Charleston by name, but subtle pushbacks began surfacing. Anonymous leaks hinted that investigators were still deep in the weeds, combing through hours of surveillance footage, private messages, and witness statements. Sources close to the case suggested that the lack of an arrest didn't prove innocence. It meant prosecutors were building carefully, avoiding the kind of rushed charges that collapse in court. But that caution only fed Charleston's fire. He turned every delay, every vague press conference, every no comment into fuel. To him, the silence was proof the system had nothing. To investigators, it was strategy. And the longer it dragged on, the louder Charleston's voice grew.
Why would they let him walk this freely, only to lose endorsements and sponsorships and cancel shows and not his freedom? In the climate that we're in,
The question hung in the air. What's really happening? No one could answer clearly. That vacuum, that silence, gave Charleston space to shape the story. What began as a murder investigation had become a cultural storm. It wasn't just about David anymore. It was about race, justice, fame, and who gets to define guilt in the era of viral content. And at the center wasn't a police chief or a prosecutor. It was Charleston White. As weeks turned into months, the case stopped being a legal mystery and became a mirror, reflecting how society consumes crime, celebrity, and outrage. Charleston wasn't just part of the conversation. He was the conversation, louder than the police, bolder than the lawyers, and more viral than the journalists trying to stick to the facts. Meanwhile, the official investigation pressed on, slow, methodical, and quiet. Detectives traced digital trails, coordinated with federal agencies, and sifted through forensics. But for David's fans, Charleston's voice became something else entirely: hope. In a world eager to bury their idol, Charleston gave them permission to keep believing. His arguments, flawed or not, gave them a script to fight back against the headlines. And in the online era, sometimes, the story matters more than the truth. Brands, fans, and media all found themselves trapped in the same waiting game, waiting for an arrest, a charge, a statement, something. And in that silence, Charleston thrived. Because the longer nothing happened, the more powerful his words sounded. The case isn't closed. The truth isn't known. But the impact is undeniable. Charleston White didn't just inject himself into a national scandal, he reshaped its rhythm. He made David's innocence as viral as the crime itself. He turned speculation into debate, debate into content, and content into influence. For David, the consequences are still unfolding, a career suspended between loyalty and doubt. For law enforcement, the stakes are higher than ever. If they move too soon without airtight proof, Charleston's words will come back to haunt them. And for the public, this case stands as a warning, proof of how easily truth can drown in clicks, clips, and commentary. What do you think about Charleston White's revelation on D4DV? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and tap the cards on screen for more.